So in thinking what I wanted to present, I was trying to make sure that you've had a very long day on Thursday, and then even today it's been very long. How can I keep it sort of engaging? And so I decided to focus a lot on issues specific to school climate. And so we'll talk about some practical ideas that individuals can implement, that schools can implement, because I truly think that climate is everything. So let me briefly go through the research, and forgive me, much of this already, but in doing so, it allows me to give a shout out to these colleagues of mine and yours that have done amazing work in this area. So without a doubt, we know that immigrant youth, they struggle. They're, let's say, a minority population, and we can define minority in a variety of ways, and they're disproportionately affected by bullying. This is something that is constant in the literature. And related to minority populations, I've also seen that when I'm looking at the bullying and cyberbullying literature related to religious minorities, related to those in the sexual orientation minority, etc. So you absolutely understand this. There's been great work done. One of the things that rises to the surface when you look at the literature associated with immigrants, those who are non-native, is prejudicial beliefs. Now, those prejudicial beliefs perhaps are coming from mom, dad, perhaps they're coming from society, unfortunately. And of course, we're trying to break down walls. We're trying to promote diversity and inclusion and tolerance and sincere, unconditional love for other people. But we have these historical factors, or we have these social factors that are playing a strong role in sort of instigating or motivating the bullying. Another thing that rose to the surface had to do with moral disengagement. And you're familiar with this term. If you're not, it just relates to how sometimes there's this ethical code in society, like the social contract. You understand that. We all agree, because we're a part of society, to abide by these unstated rules. But then with moral disengagement, we personally sometimes feel like we're exempt. Or let's say that we do have a personal code. There's certain aspects of the situation, the environment, the scenario, how you interpret what's going on or what's previously occurred, which again allows you to detach from the moral code that you would typically follow. And what we're seeing very clearly is that this is affected by situational factors. And I would say in large part, that could be the peer, that could be the peer group, the climate at school. All of that seems to matter so much, but that's encouraging to me because we can specifically target those areas and consequently, hopefully make progress in reducing moral disengagement and of course, reducing prejudicial beliefs and consequently bullying and cyberbullying. So there's been very little done related to cyberbullying amongst immigrant populations. This is sad, but it's also something that shouts out, hey, we need more research. Researchers, those working on theses, dissertations, please focus on this area because we need to build up the literature base. A UNESCO study that James pointed me to specifically found that immigrant students do experience bullying by messages. And so I'm imagining direct message, chat type messages in WhatsApp, those types of programs. They definitely experience those more often than those who are not immigrants, so those who are native born. A study in Spain found that first generation immigrants, they're more likely to be not only targets of cyberbullying, but also aggressors, which makes sense because as we've studied cyberbullying, we know that youth feel various forms of strain or stress because of that victimization, and then consequently, because they haven't developed positive coping skills or healthy ways to cope with the harassment, they act out. So naturally, they would, it seems, become aggressors as well. We're also seeing that second generation immigrants, according to the study in Spain, were more likely to be cyberbullying victims or targets. And then the last point of research that I wanted to bring up, and you're welcome to share with me anything else that you found, is an American study, but they found no significant difference between immigrants and non-immigrants when it comes to cyberbullying. But I think that is because their measure was a little bit limited, and that's okay. Of course, in research projects, we're limited in what we can do, what we can ask related to length and the variables that we're focusing in on. They only measured it in terms of how often it happens at their school. And if you need our more specific and detailed measures related to cyberbullying, we're happy to send that to you. Hopefully people will use a more robust measure in the future. But they did find that cyberbullying affects the sense of school belonging. That's what stuck out to me. And that's what really points to the area that we need to focus in on. How can we promote school belonging? And again, that's tied into school climate. Before I get into school climate and then spend the rest of my time focusing on sort of prevention, I want to share with you some more recent research that we've done. And as I mentioned, please forgive the US-centric findings here. Again, we hope to have international data soon. But if you're just looking at this understudied population of tweens, 9 to 12-year-olds, again, many people focus on teens, but perhaps neglect tweens, at least in my country. 9 to 12-year-olds, this national sample, we see that when it comes to school-based bullying, it's 1 out of 2 across the major genders. Being cyberbullied, you see that's about 1 out of 7, 1 out of 8. Bullying others at school, again, tweens, 9 to 12-year-olds, it's about 1 out of, let's say, 7, 1 out of 8. And then cyberbullying others, it's quite small, maybe 1 out of 20 or less. You can see it across the major genders, just to give us a reference point. But I wanted to share that when we were focusing on this understudied population of tweens, you can see how it affected them. Their friendships, their physical health, their feelings about themselves. So that ties into self-esteem, which we know has been studied at length related to cyberbullying and bullying, etc. Now, we didn't have a large enough sample to be able to look at, let's say, immigrant youth. In future studies, we hope to have a larger sample. So please just stay in touch with me about this, and hopefully we'll have some new data soon. This is our findings related to just school bullying across the major genders and across America, middle schoolers and high schoolers, 12 to 17-year-old. If I just draw your attention to the second and the fourth group of bars, you can simply see that 3 out of 4 youth have been bullied at school in their lifetime, and about 1 out of 3 say that they have bullied others at school. Just a reference point here. And related to cyberbullying, if you look at the second and the fourth group of bars, 1 out of 4 say that they've been cyberbullied across their lifetime. Again, 12 to 17-year-olds, and about 1 out of 8 or so have cyberbullied others across their lifetime. We absolutely need to study immigrant populations and their experiences with cyberbullying in much more detail. I hope to do this, and I hope all of you can do this as well, or those of you who are interested, perhaps we can work together. There's a great dearth in the research related to cyberbullying and immigrant populations. Here's what sticks out to me. Over half of those who were cyberbullied, they said that it deeply affected their ability to learn and feel safe at school. Youth cannot bracket it. We cannot be telling youth, hey, put down your phone, delete that app. No, it's still affecting their lives in meaningful ways at school, in the community, perhaps at home as well. I also wanted to bring this up since I mentioned it earlier. There's a strong overlap. This is just previous 30 days. So in the last month, you've been targeted. Well, of those who have been bullied at school, 85% as compared to 15% were bullied online. So you can see how there's this double dipping, let's say, when it comes to victimization. Same with offending. Of those who were bullied at school in the last month, 60% as compared to 40% were bullied online. So we can't, again, be dismissive or trivialize the online aspect. Clearly, this sort of transcends the, let's say, 2 worlds. There's no distinction when we're thinking about youth. Okay, thank you for bearing with me as I talked about the research aspect, and I'm happy to dialogue more specifically with you about research, about empirical analysis of these populations a little later or offline. Just let me know. But I wanted to move directly into climate because we're having to extrapolate when we're thinking about, okay, immigrant populations, they're dealing with online harassment. We know that. We don't have really clear numbers because this hasn't been studied on a broad scale where we can make generalizations. But still, what can we take away from this? So climate, of course, the elements here are connectedness, sense of belonging, which I mentioned earlier, morale, peer respect, school spirit is a part of it, and even school safety. All of these coming together in a constellation, that's basically school climate. And so it's been defined in a variety of ways, but that's how I like to conceptualize it. So if you're familiar with the research on parenting, I thought this was really interesting. So researchers such as Diana Bombrand, McCoby, and Martin, they've identified 4 parenting styles, and I'll bring this to schools in a second. And those 4 parenting styles occur across 2 dimensions. One is disciplinary structure, and one is emotional support and warmth. Very briefly, disciplinary structure means you have rules in your household, you have high expectations, you believe that your kids are going to rise up to those expectations. There's a lot of structure there. And of course, emotional support means you're warm, you're caring, you're unconditionally loving, you're supportive. So the 4 parenting styles that evolved from this were Neglectful parenting, low on structure, low on discipline, low on warmth. Permissive parenting, which is, okay, you're very loving, you're very supportive, but you don't really have any structure or rules in place, and you have pretty low expectations. Authoritarian, of course, we know high discipline, but very low warmth. And then authoritative, which they agreed was the best form of parenting, high in disciplinary structure and high in emotional support and warmth. So I wanted to build on the research that's been done related to school climate with these same sort of styles. So my colleague Justin and I, who have done a lot of great work, he's also an amazing person, so feel free to reach out to him as well. We wanted to see how this relates to bullying and cyberbullying. And what we found specific to schools was that by and large, in schools that were authoritative, there was much less bullying and cyberbullying offending. Whereas schools that were, let's say, permissive or neglectful, according to those dimensions, there was much more bullying and cyberbullying. We also saw that this was tied into school safety. Students felt the most safe in authoritative schools, again, high in disciplinary structure and high in support and warmth. And of course, consequently, or not consequently, but relatedly, schools that were, let's say, neglectful, they had a lot, they had students who felt a lot less safe. Okay, so let's think about specific strategies. We're trying to figure out about how we can have discipline, how we can have structure, but also how can we have warmth and support. And what we're finding is that this deeply reduces, bullying and cyberbullying. And I think that we can do it in specific ways to target populations that have been marginalized, to target populations that are not the majority group. For example, in our case, immigrant populations. So first, thinking about anti-bullying clubs, anti-cyberbullying clubs. I think these are valuable. You just want to make sure that the critical mass isn't specifically those kids who have been marginalized, those kids who might be considered outsiders, so to speak. We want to make sure that we have a representative assortment of youth from all walks of life, from all demographic groups. And ideally, you have some students who are student leaders, those with cachet. But these can sort of what would be the best way to say this? Carry the torch. They can carry the torch related to what is acceptable on campus. They can set standards. They can be models that others can emulate related to appropriate behavior. We can celebrate diversity. We can embrace individuals from all walks of life, different countries, different regions, etc. They can be the standard bearers. And so I like the idea of it takes one, because it really just takes one person to sort of swim upstream and care about meaningfully some sort of issue, some population, when everybody else is floating downstream and doing whatever they want. I also like the idea of purposed pairing. That's where you specifically assign, let's say, a 5th grader with a 1st grader, an 8th grader with a 6th grader, a 12th grader with a 9th grader. And ideally, you're hopefully doing this with every single student so that everyone feels like they've got an advocate on campus who can show them the ropes about how we treat other people, how we care about one another, what are the standards of behavior that are appropriate and what is unacceptable. This is uncool, this is lame. We don't do that at our school. We're better than that, and we recognize the beauty in every single individual. So that older student grows in leadership traits and skills, that younger student has a point of contact on campus and is learning from another student instead of having an adult, like a principal, preach to them or lecture to them about the standards of behavior. I also like student advisory boards, and that's where, again, you bring in students from different backgrounds, different demographics, and you create this formal entity which then advises the school about what policies to implement, what policies will fail, what programs will also succeed, and what also will not resonate with the rest of the student body. You have an inclusive approach, an inclusive voice, which again represents the students. And this can be very powerful because we don't want only the adults sort of being the ones who are building all the messaging strategies, setting all the policies and programs without really being informed as to what will resonate with the students. I also believe that it's very important to tap into youth, again, of all walks of life. Let's focus here on immigrant youth related to their skill set. Many of them have incredible talents, abilities. For example, some of them might have been skilled in drama or theater. James and I grew up in musical theater, and so we have that connection, perhaps some of you as well. But we love theater, we love musicals, it's a huge part of our lives. And so we cared about musicals from a very young age. And so perhaps we had a bit of a gifting in that area. And so my point here is that let's tap our skills set of our youth. And so perhaps we can identify individuals, for example, immigrants, who have theatrical skills, dramatical skills, and we can, with other people, because we don't want to have like this specific group, which seems like they're others, like we can other them because they're an other group. No, we want everyone to feel inclusive. So we get a group of students, representative, and then we ask them, hey, can you come up with a skit, a role-playing scenario, etc., that you can then sort of portray on stage in front of all the other students about one of these issues, whether it's bullying, cyberbullying. I would have them do issues related to dating violence because that's relevant to them, sexting because that's relevant to them. And also these areas are areas that I study. And then that's so much more relatable, so much more powerful than if adults were trying to do it. So let's tap into their skill set. Same with dance. I grew up in dance, hip hop, tap, ballet. That was a big part of my life. So many of our youth, they've grown up in those areas as well. Let's tap into their talents, and maybe they can come up with a flash mob that they can, let's say in the cafeteria, in the school lunchroom, music starts blaring through the speakers, a critical mass of students get up and they start dancing and everyone is like, what is happening? Well, that right there gives them the platform to talk about what they care about. Maybe they can say, look, we're seeing intolerance on our campus, and this specific performance was just to raise awareness, just to get you to care about how all of us are different in some capacities, and nobody should feel isolated or excluded or mistreated because they have a little bit of a difference, because we all do. I also like the idea of caring connections. We want to make sure that all immigrant youth and all youth in general have one adult on campus that they can go to if they're struggling with anything. It could be bullying and cyberbullying, but also could be problems at home, could be money problems, could be they're failing a couple of classes. And if I go into any school, I want to be able to pull aside any youth, regardless of their demographic background, and say, hey, name one adult who you would go to if you're dealing with any sort of problem. And I hope within a couple of seconds, a name pops in their head. And if it doesn't, we've identified a deficiency that must be corrected. You remember adolescence. I remember adolescence. I felt painfully alone so often. And I was always surveying the landscape, looking for someone who I could go and speak to, someone who was not going to make this a big deal across the campus, someone who was not going to broadcast this so I would be targeted for retaliation. No, we've got to have these caring connections. We've also seen more and more kindness movements, again, with the goal of promoting tolerance, promoting embracing diversity, etc. And so using social media, because so many youth are on social media, to make this happen, I think could be a powerful approach. At my university, FAU, Florida Atlantic, we have had this Honors College compliments page, I kid you not, for now, 9 years. And it gets passed on to the next generation of incoming college students every time you've got a graduating senior, etc. You can see that I was featured on this page many, many, many years ago. Mostly they feature students, sometimes they feature faculty. But the point is that we want to be able to, again, survey the landscape and identify some youth who maybe they're being targeted, maybe they're unnoticed, maybe they're never recognized. And how can we spotlight them? How can we celebrate them? And so that's what's occurring on these social media platforms in these specific accounts that are student-driven. Student voice is much more powerful in terms of being a catalyst for positive change than adult voice. Here's an Instagram page where, again, it's run by students, but they're always featuring other students across campus in order to, again, celebrate them, recognize them, notice them. And it seems like such a small token, but it's so very powerful to the youth. Some of you may follow this Humans of New York page that we have on Instagram. And so we've got this creator in New York who goes around and he takes photos of different people, wherever, different walks of life. And then in the caption, he doesn't just focus on their successes, but on their struggles, because as I know you'll agree, it's our struggles that we can really connect to. Everyone's fighting a hard battle. I think Plato said that. And I feel like, as Brene Brown talks about, vulnerabilities are what bring us together. So if we can focus on vulnerabilities, and if we spotlight them, then maybe it's like, oh, I can relate to this other student. I know what they've gone through. Here's a Humans of MSD page, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, which is in South Florida, where we had a shooting a couple of years ago, and many students died, 15 students, I believed. and they have a Humans of MSD page featuring the stories of youth. And so if I'm a student and I follow this account, I'm thinking, wow, I would never talk to this kid. They seem really popular. They seem like they've got it all figured out. But my goodness, I didn't know that they struggle in the same ways that I did in terms of feeling like they were all alone, feeling like they didn't have a community in which to belong. Well, now I'm going to definitely talk to them when I pass them in the school hallways, or I can message them on Zoom or something like that, and just chat with them because I can see that they're just like me. This is one of my friends who was in high school. Now they've graduated. They're going to graduate college pretty soon now. Her name is Sana. She struggled with alopecia, which is hair loss prematurely, this disease. And so, of course, she was quite mortified. We know how self-image matters so much when you're younger, but she wanted to flip the script related to what she considered to be a flaw, which she considered to be an imperfection. So she shared her story on social media. She took off her wig and she was embraced. She was celebrated. So the point here is that how can we have so many of our youth tell their stories, whether they come from a different country, whether they come from a different region, whether they have been bullied or cyberbullied because of that difference? And how can we allow it to be a way that they can flip the script by sharing their story and by saying, look, this is what I deal with. I know that you deal with your own issues in terms of you being singled out or marginalized for something that people perceive as different. How can we use that as a powerful tool to actually bring us all together? Pledge campaigns can be useful according to the research. Hey, I pledge not to bully. I pledge not to single people out because they seem different, whatever. But we just want to make sure that youth, if they pledge, they understand the weight and the gravity of what they're pledging to. This also might seem like just some sort of formality, but I kid you not, in the research, pledge campaigns related to abstinence or when you're young, related to not drinking alcohol and then driving, they've actually proven fruitful. So they can also prove fruitful when it comes to bullying and cyberbullying if they're done the right way. I also like the idea of student, faculty, or staff interactions. I play sports with students on my campus. And of course, we were able to do that a lot more when it comes to, or before COVID. But my point here is that on the Frisbee field, on the soccer field, on the football field, those students were able to open up to me because it's this open-ended time where conversation can naturally occur. In schools, it seems very formal. And so natural conversations related to what's going on personally doesn't happen. But if, hopefully after COVID, we can interact with our youth outside of the school walls, then they open up to you. I've been to, I think, 3 weddings of my students, not because they were in my classes, but because they opened up to me as to what was going on in their life, with their relationships, with their struggles on the sports field. We can have also competitions related to anti-bullying posters, anti-cyberbullying posters. Here's an example of what will work with younger kids. With older kids, of course, you want to use technology, creating cyberbullying PSAs. Here's another example of a cyberbullying PSA, teen dating violence PSA, sexting PSA. The point here is that, number one, youth are using their skills with their devices to create content. They're invested in the process. They know it's a message which hopefully they believe in because they chose the topic. And secondly, the school can use as part of their messaging strategies to share it on social media, share it with the parents, post it all over. And if it's a poster, like with construction paper and markers, you can have it in the hallways. The point here is that it will always be piquing the conscience of students who are looking around and seeing this. And then the students are like, wow, my school cares about this issue. And consequently, as it plants seeds, it should shift their attitudes and their behaviors. James, I'm looking at the clock, so give me a few more minutes here and I'll try to stay on schedule. I also think a lot about project-based learning. One of America's founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, he came up with this quote, which I love, which says, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn." So we have to involve our students in order for these lessons that we're trying to teach them to deeply sink in so they internalize it. So related to that and related to cyberbullying that we're seeing, not just of marginalized populations, but in general, bullying as well. I'm a big fan of digital citizenship activities. And so we fleshed out what we believe, based on research, are the most valuable to help promote individuals who are just decent human beings, online and of course offline. So here are our 10 best activities. I can send you this activity sheet. I can send you so many other resources if you just reach out to me. No need to reinvent the wheel. Happy to get you whatever you need. But digital citizenship has been studied by our colleagues at the University of New Hampshire. We think about David Finkelhor and his team, et cetera, and many other scholars have as well. I would love to see more international research devoted to digital citizenship and how it can reduce cyberbullying amongst different populations. Hopefully many of you will tackle that. Happy to assist. One of my other colleagues came up with this activity. Her name is Kristen Matheson. Would you rather? So you can see some of these cards which are distributed across students. Would you rather lose all your progress in a video game or lose all your money that you've earned? Share your successes on social media or keep them to yourself? The point here is that we want schools to demonstrate familiarity just a little bit with social media and technology. Don't worry, you don't need to learn a lot. You don't need to know a lot. You just have to broach the topic, and then students who care so much about this will carry the conversation. It'll allow you to bring up some of the more delicate issues, more sensitive issues related to harassment online, related to toxicity online or in games. But just broach the topic maybe through an activity, and then they will start talking. Just a couple more things as I get close to wrapping up here. At the beginning of each school year, we need to reach students en masse, and we need to talk to them about what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think it's okay to bring up what's happened historically related to the targeting of minority populations, related to the targeting of non-native populations, just to, again, set a hard and fast line about how that sort of stuff will be identified, will be sanctioned, that there is no room for this in this campus. And instead, what we do care about and what we want to see more intentional action toward is kindness, positivity, tolerance, etc. I also like the idea of honor codes. I think that if you do this in front of so many other students, let's say all the students in the auditorium, well, then it's a very powerful and ceremonious demonstration of what we as a school believe in. So here's an example of a code. We're going to demonstrate integrity. We're not going to lie, cheat, or steal. We're going to treat ourselves and our peers and our community with the utmost respect. And of course, you can flesh that out in a little bit more detail, but you make it a formal ceremony. And also, each student has to pass the pen that they use to sign the honor code in front of everybody else to the next student to sort of convey that, hey, we're all in this together. It requires all of us, the team approach. We've also heard that teachers, administrators, those who have any platform or work with youth in any capacity should be trusted adults. I like that idea of being a trusted adult, but what I like more is being an askable adult. Because let's say you have a student who is a non-native. Well, hopefully you've identified yourself as someone that they can come to, talk to, discuss their problems, their struggles. You can be an encouragement. You can provide advice and wisdom. You can maybe share stories of your past, how you dealt with being mistreated because of your differences. I think that's so powerful because, again, youth are looking around trying to figure out who they can go to. Someone who's safe, someone who is supportive, someone who's going to be calm, rational, reasonable, relatable. And then how are we reaching parents? Schools must reach parents so that parents of immigrants, parents of, let's say, minority groups, feel like they have support, feel like they have an advocate at the school, where the school definitely recognizes the reality of diverse populations and some of the antagonism and conflict that can bubble up and is doing something proactively about it. We must reach parent groups, and I'm happy to work with you on resources and what we've created and what you can do in order to get traction with parent groups. Plus, schools absolutely need anonymous reporting systems. Many students feel unsafe with speaking up, but if you have some sort of text line or voice line which can afford this, well, then you'll see many, many, many reports where students are the eyes and ears that you can't be at schools. Now, yes, you'll get 2 or 3 or 4 false positives, but by and large, students use this system responsibly. And you can even use free tools online to set this up, text line and voice line. Just a couple last things. And again, thank you for your graciousness. We must remind students that we need screenshots and screen recording. They should know how to take a screenshot on every device, even their iWatch, and of course their phones, even their PlayStation, even their Xbox. And so we have documents related to how to do this if you'd like to distribute this. But not only that, we know TikToks are videos, Instagram stories are videos. Snapchat, videos, Facebook videos. So many more people are doing live streaming. They need to know on their iPhone or on their Android phone how to take a screen recording, because then the school can investigate, plus the social media site can help take it down, ban the account, delete the content, etc. You can also, again, set it up on Android phones as well. If you need details related to that so you can pass it on to students you work with, let me know. Also, if you struggle or you're trying to help a student get content taken down, hateful pictures or videos removed, an account deleted online with a social media company, I have relationships. And by the way, they come to our conferences, like the World Anti-Bullying Forum, International Bullying Prevention Conference. They come to our conferences. They care about this issue. Reach out to me and I will do all that I can to help you get that account or that hate page or picture taken down. We know the students, all they really want really is for the problem to go away. So let's try to help them in those ways. Last thing, identity matters so much. When I was in high school, I was the Silverhawk, and we were told we should rise up like a bird. We should soar above in terms of our standards of behavior. So tie it into the identity of the school. This is just what we do around here. We have to move from I shouldn't do that because I'm going to get detention or Saturday school or suspended to I wouldn't do that because I'm a Silverhawk, I'm a Trojan, I'm a Cardinal, whatever. So yeah, convey that we're better than that. We're mature. We're not toddlers. We're not juveniles. We're not immature. We're classier than that, etc. And it's just constant reminders of who we are and what we represent. And as I mentioned earlier, get the students involved to help you with the messaging strategy. They want to belong to something that's winning. They want to belong to something that is cool. So use the identity of the school to your advantage and use peer pressure in positive ways to make this happen. I know that's a lot of content. I'm happy to send you my slides, drop me an email. Happy to dive deep into these areas with you. I care so much about it. I think you can tell with how I'm expressing these sorts of points. But right now I want to stop my slides and open it up for questions. And again, thank you so much for caring about this issue, supporting migrant populations, supporting immigrants and non-natives. Being a minority myself, I care deeply about this and I've had my own painful experiences.